And we've got no one, but that's okay. Hey, how's everybody doing? Thanks for tuning in. Jorge, I saw you in there. Um, Everyone, my name is Joey Feith. I'm the founder of thephysicaleducator.com. Hey, and I'm a phys ed teacher here in Montreal, Canada. I teach at St. George's School of Montreal. And this is my attempt at trying to improve the scope vlog, which I'll be bringing back and I'll be talking about it more this week. But right now I'm just really doing some video and some audio tests for a few things I'm trying out. So if you want to tune in, I'm going to be talking about my grade 6 target games unit, which we just completed. But if you do not want to tune in, I totally understand. I'll probably be talking and blogging about this later on this week. So that said, this past week we wrapped up our grade 6 target games unit. Now, in grade 6, what we were looking at using a mature pattern for the underhand throw and modified target games, and I'll talk about that. That was our opening lesson. We were looking at appropriate shot selection based on the situation that you're in the game, and also striking with an implement in target game settings such as golf and croquet. So let's talk a little bit about how I approached these outcomes and what my students did to hopefully master them. Now, our opening lesson, we started off just exploring what target games were. It was the last game category that we saw this year, and usually it's a game category that I start off with, especially with the younger students, because it's the least tactically complex, which means that there's not a whole lot of gray in target games. It's kind of a yes-no situation. The decisions are pretty straightforward. It really comes down to being able to apply the skill in the situation that you're in. Now, we discussed what target games were. We came up with a database of games that we could identify as target games. So we worked out that, and I kept track of that using my paper app on my iPad. And then we talked about, okay, what are some of the skills involved in some of these target games? What are some of the tactics involved in some of these target games? And then we went out and we started playing some of these games. Now, for our opening lesson, what we did is we looked at 3 different target games that involved underhand throwing. We looked at beanbag bocce ball. We looked at cornhole, and thanks for tuning in, and we looked at ladder ball. Now, if you're not sure what ladder ball is, you might have seen it before. It's a game that's played with a ladder. There are 3 poles. It's worth 3 points, 2 points, and 1 point. And what you're throwing is a bola, which is 2 balls on a string that you're throwing. You're trying to get the ball to hang off of one of the poles, which will give you that many points. So the students went around in stations, keeping track of their scores as they were moving through. They had little score sheets and focusing on, okay, what makes for an appropriate underhand throw, and then trying to recall what were those critical elements for underhand throwing, which is something you've seen a long time ago if you're in grade 6 at this point. It's something that you're supposed to have mastered by the time you're in grade 2. But the students had a lot of fun, and we talked about okay, what are some of the tactics you're applying, and try and think of taking safer shots compared to riskier shots based on the situation you're in. Trying to, in cornhole, trying to see if you can knock away the beanbag or try and knock a beanbag into the hole. And in bocce, seeing how you can position yourself based on the other team's positioning, meaning can you knock one of your beanbags closer, or if you're playing actual bocce, one of your bocce balls closer, or knock one of your opponents away. So we kind of talked about that kind of positioning, those types of games. And it was a good lesson. I felt like it went well overall. The students had a lot of fun trying out the different target games, keeping track of their scores as they went through. And it was interesting because a lot of the students were very against the idea of target games when I told them that that's what we were going to be doing. And they got really into it. They're against it because they're like, oh, how is this so active? And it's true, they're not as active games as, let's say, like an invasion game or a striking fielding or even a net wall game. But that doesn't mean that they're not equally as challenging. So first lesson went really well. Got the kids a little pumped up about target games. Got to assess a lot of underhand throwing. I was looking at critical elements, but also trying to apply that or look at how they were using their underhand throw based on the game situation. So that was our first lesson. In our second lesson, we were looking at shot selection. And I was really proud of this lesson. This was probably my favorite lesson of the 3. And what we did is we were going to play some disc golf. So how I set it up is the students they each had a whole design sheet. And on that sheet, they had a map of the schoolyard. So the whole schoolyard, and the playgrounds and everything you're seeing. It's basically a bird's eye view of the school. I could have taken it from Google Maps, but I actually have the blueprint map, which is a lot clearer to see. So I was using that. And they had to write down on their sheet, they had a section on the side that said, okay, what hole are you working at? What's the color of your hole? Each hole had a different color. So that was because they had a tee-off cone and a hoop. We're using hoops as the target, which are color matched, and then it was easier for kids to kind of figure out where they had to go. And they had to say who was designing the hole, and then they had to decide what the par was. So students went out into the playground or into the schoolyard, and what I had them do is that with their sheets, they had to design a hole that was going to be challenging and fun to play. So I let them kind of really go wild with this, where they could decide where people were teeing off, where the target was, and they could. I made them think, okay, what kind of obstacles could you involve in your hole? How could you make this an exciting hole to play? So a lot of them were thinking, okay, how can we go around trees or up a staircase or those types of things? So each team got to design their own hole, and then what they had to do is they had to practice playing at their hole. And as they were practicing, they had to keep track of their strokes. So meaning how many times they were throwing the disc. So again, if you're just tuning in, I'm talking about my target games unit of my grade 6 students, and we're looking at appropriate shot selection based on the situation in the game. So once they practice playing at their hole and they decide, okay, what's the average amount of shots, that would be their par. So they would set a par for the hole, and I said try and go anywhere between 2 to 5. So each team designed their own hole, and then we all came together and we just shared where our tee-offs were and where our targets were, and then they had to go back and put their sheets where their tee-offs were, and each team got to then go play the course. So you got to play your hole and everybody else's hole as well, keeping track of your scores as we go through. And we're talking about how in golf, you're actually going for the lowest score, obviously, and how you can go into the negatives based on where you're at with par. But the big idea here was shot selection. So as I was going around, I was talking with each student, trying to see, based off of the shot they're going to take, what they were taking into consideration before they took that shot. And we'd come in, we'd have discussions with the group, so it's a small group, and after 3 rounds, I would have the whole team or the whole class come in, and we'd discuss, okay, what are some of the things you're taking into consideration? Well, you're taking into consideration the terrain, you're taking into consideration any obstacles, you're taking into consideration the wind, you're taking into consideration what your current score is, so if you're going to try and go for a riskier shot or a less risky shot, whatever it may be. So that was really fun. I had a blast. To be totally honest with you, I did both my grade 6 classes. With one of the grade 6 classes, it went absolutely fantastic. It was a dream. I was so happy. We were outside. It was a beautiful day. Everything was going great. I was getting tons of assessment in. Everybody was really engaged and having fun. Second group, I tried to open it up a little. I tried to make the course larger, and I gave them a section of the school that goes around the school where I wasn't able to supervise them as meticulously as I was supervising the other group. And there's a little bit more fooling around going on. People were throwing discs into crowded areas where other students were playing the hole. People were hanging off of trees, that kind of stuff going on. I was a little bummed out, but to be honest, that was totally my fault because I made the area way too large for me to be able to supervise appropriately. So that was that, but overall, I thought the lesson was fantastic. I was really happy with everything I was able to collect, and I was really happy about how the students were thinking about their shots. And the reason this was so important for me is because for lesson number 3, we're going to be looking at striking a stationary object with an implement in a target game setting. And as much as I would have loved to take my kids golfing, I don't think we would have got 18 holes of golf in a 75-minute block. So I took them to Putting Edge, which is an indoor mini putt facility here in Montreal. And it's really cool. It's all black lights and lasers and all kinds of stuff. And it's kind of a glow-in-the-dark mini putt. So the kids were really excited to be going there. But once we got there, the big thing was, okay, first of all, what's the proper technique for putting a ball in golf? So we looked over the proper technique, and we also said, okay, what do we currently know about target games? And we talked about the shot selection that we saw when we were doing our disc golf. Because in mini putt, obviously, you're in all these kind of wacky situations, and you really have to take into consideration the terrain, and also take into consideration your score, and all these things that we talked about in disc golf, but apply that in a mini golf setting. So the kids were really fired up. They had a blast. We were there. But with the travel time, we only had about 45 minutes to play, but they got to play all 18 holes. Every team got to play 18 holes. They were divided into small groups of 4 and 5, and it was overall. I was really happy with the lesson. Now my only problem with Putting Edge was the fact that it was pitch black in there, and trying to take any video or any picture of the kids, which I would love to have for their portfolios and to use for assessment later on, was really difficult. And I'm really glad because at first I was going to have the kids go to Putting Edge with iPod touches that they would be able to film themselves and then talk about, okay, why did you take that shot? What would have been maybe a more appropriate shot? But the reality is that it was just way too dark to be doing any of that. But that was it. That was our target games unit. It was very, very short. I'm really crunched for time right now. May is a crazy month at school. I don't know if it's a crazy month at your school, but there's so many field trips and all kinds of things going on that you don't get to see your students a whole bunch. But I was really happy that I was able to squeeze that target game unit in, and now we are ready to be moving on to our second net wall games unit this year, where we will be working on defensive and offensive tactics and net wall games using games such as volleyball or mini volleyball, spike ball, and chook ball. So that is it. This was a really short vlog. I'm just doing this again. I'm happy I was able to share this, but it's really just, this is a video and audio test. Scope vlog will hopefully be coming back this week. Hopefully I'll be able to share kind of the new schedule and everything. But for those of you who don't tune in, thank you so much for watching. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you had a fantastic week teaching last week, and I wish you nothing but the best this week. Again, my name is Joey Feith from thephysicaleducator.com, and I will see you tomorrow. Thanks.